been a while, a long time since I was in the classroom at Calvin Seminary. Was being taught by Sid Greidanus. Sid is the father of Morris, by the way, who happened to also be our pastor at First CRC for many years in Grand Rapids. So Sid didn't know me, but he knew of me, I'm sure. You know how people talk. Well, I mean, maybe for better or for worse, you never know how people talk. That's the problem. So, I mean, his son Morris was our pastor for our whole family there, so we probably occasionally talked in a pastoral care manner about the flock, the CRC flock. A lot of us come from Dutch heritage, so kind of think of ourselves as brothers and sisters in Christ. I mean, not just in Christ, but also as by heritage, ancestry. However, I can't help but wonder if they maybe talked a little bit more than just nice, kind, pastoral care conversation. Can't help but wonder. So anyways, I was sitting in, this was many years after our family attended that church and before we moved from Michigan to California. But I was back there I went to Calvin College for my bachelor's degree, 2 bachelor's degrees, and then a master's degree. And so I started my master's degree there at the seminary, finished at Fuller. But the main point is I was sitting in this class taught by Sid Greidanus. I forget what the subject was, but something came up about incense. And I raised my hand and asked a question or made a comment about incense, negative. I was a little negative, critical about using incense at church. And Sid responded sarcastically, "There's nothing wrong with incense." Well, that's arguable, actually. There actually is something wrong with incense. No, I'm not saying biblically that the Bible forbids it. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that, in fact, we know they used a lot of incense for various purposes in the Bible, especially Old Testament, and often used it allegorically or symbolically as, alluding to prayer. The fragrance of your prayer goes up to God, like the incense. And so I wasn't arguing that the Bible forbids it. I was arguing that coming out of a certain era, and this was in the this is several decades ago. So my mind, not a lot of people's minds, not only my generation, not really even my generation, but the prior generations. I remember, like, in high school, mostly in high school, incense was kind of it was associated with being a cover-up for mostly marijuana usage, so that people using marijuana would try to use the fragrance of incense to mask the strong smell of marijuana. And so so for that reason, I was thinking and saying that, it's probably not good to use incense because it has that reputation. Not so much maybe anymore now that marijuana has become more of an acceptable substance, I suppose you'd say, legal, but especially coming out of the 60s when it was used on a large basis, by the so-called hippies. There's nothing wrong with so-called hippies per se, but it did have that association. And so that was my objection. I was thinking, well, this is kind of strange to use incense because of the association it has. Now I'm talking about Protestant churches. Of course, Catholic churches use it a lot more because they use it for they use it along with the Mass and the Eucharist, as similar to as it is alluded to in the Old Testament. But I think I was spot on in saying that I don't think it fits well unless you have some kind of regular tradition like the Catholic Church of using it. But if you're just using it, here and there, or in like home Bible studies and small gatherings of fellowship, I think you might be sending the wrong message to people who could be offended by it. That was my main point. We're not supposed to cause our neighbor to stumble, so to speak, especially our Christian neighbor. Like the Bible talks about things we eat. It's okay to eat anything, but if it causes your neighbor, let's say you're with a person of Jewish ancestry, background, religious heritage, they have, maybe it's a Jewish person who's converted to Christianity, Messianic Jew, or Jew for Jesus, as they say. Some of them may retain some of the customs they have from the Jewish faith. Yes, and that they continue that while at the same time still worshiping Jesus as the Son of God, accepting Jesus as a Savior. And so, like if you were with them, or even if they're just Jewish not knowing Jesus yet, rather than offend them, especially if you're trying to share the gospel with them and you do something that's contrary to their dietary laws, but it's not banned by the New Testament, it's allowed with the New Covenant. It's a good thing to be sensitive to that fact. Or else you're gonna lose them right away. They're not even gonna hear anything you say if something you eat in front of them is enough to cause them to feel like revolting in their stomach and in their mind. It's it's abhorrent to them. And you can think of a lot of things. Now that might extend to our Muslims, brothers and sisters too. They're not our brothers and sisters in Christ, but we should try to share the gospel with them as well. But if we're doing things that make them uncomfortable because of things they believe the Quran forbids, at least in their presence, we should not do that. Such as, let's say you're a Christian, and Christians don't have any problem in general with going to the beach and a lady wearing a bikini, right? It's not forbidden by our Christian Bible. But for some Muslims, the exposure of the woman's body is offensive and even forbidden, they argue, by the Quran. So if you're in the Mideast, or maybe you've lived in a Muslim community in the United States, and you knew they were around, and let's say you lived in Detroit, where there's large Muslim communities, and it's a summer day, and you think, oh, I'll go lay out in my backyard if you're a lady, you're going to lay out in the backyard and work on your tan on a beach towel or on a lawn chair. Well, if you had Muslims living right next door and they're strict about that, and you're sincere about sharing your faith, trying to bring them to Christ, you would want to think twice about doing that. You wouldn't, because you're not going to get to first base with them in terms of sharing the gospel if they see you laying out in a bikini. You've already turned them off so much. And so that's what I was saying. That's the context in which I was arguing about incense being, a turn off to some people, a put off in certain areas, certain times and places. Like where I grew up in Michigan, I know there were people who thought, who, as I said, they thought incense was a cover up for doing marijuana. And say they're not even. They might not even be Christians. They might just be like, Joe citizen, good citizen. And so you're a Christian, you want to share the faith with them, but you don't, one day, for example, say you have a Bible study, and somebody brings along incense and candles, just kind of give it a nice, casual atmosphere, aromatherapy. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, of course, nothing wrong with that. But if it causes somebody to stumble, especially if you're going to try to share the gospel with them, you probably not want to do that. You might say to that person, well, my neighbor has, they got that stereotype about incense. I know, I've talked to him about it. So I don't think we should do that here. He could see the candles, and he might come knocking on the door and smell it and wonder what's going on. And if that's the case, then I'll never be able to lead him to Christ. So that's the context in which I was saying you shouldn't use incense. And I thought Sid was a little way too sarcastic. And, when you're a student in a classroom and you ask a question and they shut you down like that with sarcasm, that's the worst of all ways to deal with things as a professor. You could handle that much better. Not try to just muscle me with sarcasm. So I have to say shame on Sid for that, the way he handled that. And however he is, wherever he is now, maybe he's still in Grand Rapids. I don't think he's teaching anymore. I'm pretty sure Morris is still there too, but not at First CRC either. We lift up the Greidanus family in prayer, Sid, Morris, and all their kids and spouses, and hopefully we can be reconciled at some point in time and not be like competitively trying to put each other down. I never was that way, but maybe they felt they had to do that towards me. I don't know. Hear our prayer, Lord, in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.